What's up, guys? It's Andy. It's been a minute. It's been a couple of months, and boy, do I have a story time for you, because since October, mine and Elliot's world has been like upside down, and I could ramble forever, and this is already going to be a long video, so I made some talking points to keep myself on track. There's been a lot of moving, anxiety. It really took a mental toll and it being winter with seasonal depression, it really made that really difficult. So I'm going to try and stay on point, be factual, not talk too much, because as much as I could ramble, y'all don't want to stick around and hear me ramble for like 3 hours. So there will not be any mention of barn owner or staff names or the names of the barns. I just want to share my story and share my experience with proof and hopefully help someone else in recognizing red flags. There will be 3 barns. We will refer to one as the rehab barn, which is where we've been the last 2 years, the new barn, which is where we moved from rehab barn, and then current barn, which is obviously where we're currently at. So those will be the 3 titles in this story time, and keep those in your brain. So let's go ahead and get started with part 1 of why we left the rehab stable. All right, so why did Elliot and I leave rehab stable? So we'd been there for 2 years almost, and one of those years was basically all rehabbing. So no riding. I had a lot of experience directly with the owner and with staff, and I was just focused on, was I going to keep Elliot? Was he going to get better? And just getting through the rehab. So once we got the okay from the vet to get back to our normal riding schedule, I just kind of sat and thought about a couple things. You can have the fanciest barn and the highest quality of care and still be missing crucial components of healthcare, as well as for people like socialization. So there were no turnout friends for Elliot, no matter how much I advocated, which made me so sad. There just wasn't a lot of options, right? So when you're at a barn that only has 9 stalls, there's not a lot of combinations you can put together. Add into the fact that it was a barn full of people who thought cribbing was contagious, even though none of the other horses picked it up over the 2 years we were there. No one wanted their horse turned out with Elliot. Not his fault. I thought that was very dumb. There was also too deep of footing in the outdoor arena for us to actually ride outside without risk of soft tissue injury. And he literally just recovered from a year-long rehab, so that's not something I'm gonna risk. So we were stuck riding in the indoor all the time, because other than maybe walking in the outdoor, the footing was just way too deep. It was just asking for an accident to happen. There was also an insane amount of gnats and mosquitoes, being by running water on the north front facing side and then trees surrounding on all the other sides. It was a recipe for breeding grounds for those 2 bugs. That made riding outside difficult as well, because from some of my videos you saw that we did like riding around the property, but Elliot would get really irritated really quickly, and it was so bad that he broke out in like systemic hives and had to be on medication and get a fly sheet because he was so miserable. Additionally, once we got back to regular riding and workflow, I hated being the only hunter jumper at an all dressage barn. Like, that made me insane. I thought there was more cross training happening, but putting up and taking down jumps, not even being able to leave out pole exercises, was really physically taxing, because I would only set what I knew I could put away after my ride because I had to. It was just lonely, because I would ride at night and all of these women who were nice either were married to money or were retired with money, and so they would all be out during the day, and lessons were all during the day, and all of the activity was during the day. So by the time I got off work, I was alone. And it just, after 2 years, it kind of was losing its appeal to be riding alone all the time, and Elliot lost a lot of skill as far as being able to function and pay attention while other horses are in the arena. Lastly, through the rehab process and kind of the after effects, it was just one of those situations where an owner of a facility and the staff of a facility cares so much about a horse that they cross the line and think that they know what's better for your horse than you do. And they will do what they think is right instead of following vet directions. And I got really tired of that really quick. And I'm a people pleaser, so I really didn't want to cause any trouble. But I did eventually have to end up standing up for myself, because it was ridiculous that no facility should ever, unless you're literally causing neglect to your horse or harm to your horse or others, they should not be able to tell you what care your horse will receive. So that is why at the end of October, we packed up and we went to New Barn. So let's move on to chapter 2 or part 2 and talk about New Barn. What happened at New Barn and why we left New Barn before we even hit the 2-month mark.
Okay, bear with me. This is part 2 of New Barn and the story time of how this was just an absolute freaking mess. And I definitely want to make sure I'm going over all the red flags and all of the things that happened. I have screenshots of message exchanges as well as photo evidence of certain situations and pretty much anything I could do to bring validity while maintaining anonymity for the parties involved, just so that other people can learn from this experience. And also it's kind of therapeutic for me to talk about because I was really struggling. So I have a very long checklist for this section. I'm going to just go through it so that I can stay on topic. So let's get started. So on the surface, I saw this barn in September of last year. Everything I saw during the tour seemed like a perfect in-between between like country bumpkin do-it-yourself farm and like very, very high-end like rehab stable was. And the first red flag was the day we arrived, after settling him into the quarantine paddock, I was watching him for a little bit and noticed when he went to eat from the large bale flake of hay that was in there, that the corner of it was moldy. So that's not a great first impression. I went ahead and removed the molded piece and I let the barn owner know, and she didn't really have a reaction. I don't want to say she didn't care, but also she wasn't concerned about the fact that the bale they were pulling hay from was moldy. Okay, the second red flag was that during the tour, I was very upfront about Elliot's cribbing. When he would do it, he hadn't taken down any boards. They hadn't had to fix anything at rehab stable. He would crib on metal doors, but the way the stalls were built at New Barn, he didn't really have much options for cribbing other than outside. So I was hopeful with the longer turnout of 12 to 14 hours a day that he would crib less, but there isn't a guarantee. Like once they start cribbing, it's very hard to get them to stop. So to some degree, I expected him to be cribbing. And I offered as well, although I'm not a fan of collars because they're not breakaway and he could really hurt himself, I was open to using a crib collar to help deter him from chewing on the wood and cribbing. I was very upfront with this because there are some barns that won't accept cribbers, period, which I disagree with now that I've owned a cribber. I can see both sides of it. I think that a safe and well-built facility would be able to accommodate a cribber. That's just my opinion, maybe a controversial one, don't want to start any fights, but it shouldn't be so hard. So after being so upfront with this, being told it was all good, we'll go day by day and just see how it goes, like all those things, I was receiving texts during my workday from the barn owner about Elliot pulling down fence boards and Elliot cribbing and Elliot ruining the new fencing. And it was very stressful and caused me a lot of anxiety. And he was being villainized for ruining the fences, which he wasn't the only one that was doing damage to the fences. And at the rehab stable, he had never pulled a board off within 2 years. Okay, so the fact that it had been within the first couple weeks that I'm getting a message that he's pulled down 5 boards and she doesn't have time to put them back up and I need to come fix it, that sort of thing, just added a lot of stress to my life. And then anytime anything was broken or missing or any sort of problem, the first horse to be blamed was Elliot, to the point where I had to take video evidence of me holding Elliot while 2 other horses destroyed a fence so that I could prove that it wasn't mine. The third red flag was a poorly built DIY and poorly maintained facility. So I'm all about DIY, but you have to do it correctly. I had so many issues with this barn. Of course, when a barn advertises online, they're going to put up their best pictures from when everything was new. I am not a fan of that. I do wish boarding facilities would post, you can have your sale or marketing album, but then also have pictures of what the place actually looks like, because there has been more than one occasion where I've liked the pictures of a facility and then shown up and been like, where's the barn in the pictures? Because this certainly isn't it. So The wood fencing was all installed with nails and not screws, which is not safe for livestock, and they're easily removable. They were not reinforced with any electrical fencing to create a safe boundary between the fields, so the horses would just either run through, pull off the boards, break the fences. They even managed to bend and lift a metal gate between the two pastures because it wasn't secured, and they all like did a pasture swap. Like, I don't understand how something like that happens. Like, it just was way too much. The posts were rotted and the fences were easily dismantled. And I think Elliot honestly thought it was a game. Like, he would pull the board down so that someone would put it back up, and then he'd pull it down again, because when a board was down, it would take days to fix it, which would leave the exposed nails and wood on the ground in the pasture with the horses. And when it was fixed, the nails and whatever was in the post was not removed prior to adding more. So by the time my husband and I got around to fixing some of these fences, they had a combination of nails, short screws, and there were 5 to 6 on both ends of the boards, which compromises the wood. It's not going to have integrity if it's punctured that many times with that many different types of adherents. So my husband and I ended up fixing a handful of boards, even ones that Elliot didn't ruin, because I had ended up buying a box of like 500 3-inch decking screws, so like really good screws. And guess what? Those boards didn't come down after I put in the decking screws. But you can sure bet the horses went and found the ones that didn't have the decking screws and took those ones down. There was only so much we could do because the fence line that was the issue, the back half of it still had rotten posts in the ground. So we had to literally put 2 pieces of 2x4s on the sides, bolt it through the post, and then attach the boards to those 2x4s in order to give them something to hold on to, because the tops were completely eaten, rotted, and withered away. Not to mention, as a sign of good faith, because I didn't want to cause any problems and I felt like I was being blamed for all of this stuff and Elliot was being blamed for all this stuff, I bought everything out of pocket, and mine and my husband's time was all us taking care of this issue. There's no maintenance person for the barn. For me, putting a few screws in wasn't an issue until we started fixing problems that weren't our problems. And that is where I got aggravated. The 4th red flag for me was the dishonesty about the amenities of the facility. I think it was advertised as what the final product of the constructed property would be, not how it currently was. So the new barn where I had Elliot, the addition, was advertised as having heat, but there were no heating ducts installed on that side of the barn. So when it's -20 outside, it was -20 in the barn. The entryways were poorly built with major air leaks. This is my number one pet peeve, and the one thing that I miss about rehab stable is the doors were like properly installed and well sealed, and then the exit and entry points for outside had double garage doors, so an exterior and an interior, so that the heat would stay in the barn and it would stay warm. If I had to build a barn, that's how I would do it. The horses get used to the sound. It doesn't, you can get quiet, open and closed doors. So these doors were just part of the original barn or taken off of the original barn and added to the new addition, whatever the cheapest DIY option was. And it was very aesthetically and functionally ineffective because all of the creases of the doors had to be covered with horse blankets to try and keep out the air leaks. And it did not work. They advertised an indoor wash stall for year-round use in the new barn where I had Elliot, but they failed to mention that it doesn't have hot water and the pipes would freeze in the winter. And they literally were storing wheelbarrows and buckets and all this construction stuff in the wash stall. So even if it did have hot water, because again, this is November, December, right in the Midwest, even if it did have hot functional water, you couldn't use it because there was all this stuff in it. So that was grossly misrepresented. And the indoor arena construction, like final touches, like the final doors, the windows being put in, the permanent lighting being installed, all of the footing being dragged and reevaluated, like that was all told to me in September that it would be done by the time we moved in November because they were actively working on it. Well, guess what wasn't done by the time we moved in? All of those things. Now, luckily, Elliot adjusted pretty well and he wasn't so spooky with the light, like the storage for the ceiling parts and the lights was in the arena. Like in the corner. And it was just a hot mess. Not to like, don't even get me started on the footing there. It was like clay and rubber tire chopped up into tiny little pieces. It was absolute garbage, and he rode terribly on it. I felt like I was blindsided, like, oh, well, now actually this stuff's going to be done by spring. Okay, supposedly, how do I know it's going to be done? Why am I paying your new barn fees for amenities that I don't have yet? Make that make sense. My fifth red flag, which is where the story time gets interesting, is the serious safety concerns I had at this facility. So they started, once it got cold, there were barn heaters in the original barn, the aisleway barn that was attached to the arena, as well as one in the arena. And there was not one in the new barn yet. So they started those heaters at the beginning of winter season without inspecting them first. So Elliot and I are in the indoor walking around, getting him used to the sound of the heaters. He's being great. I want to, ride him a little bit or lunge him a little bit. So I brought him in there first to make sure he was okay with it. And we're walking to the back of the arena, and he starts freaking out of nowhere. I'm like, you've been walking for 10 minutes. Like, why are you suddenly scared? Turn around, heater's on fire. Actual fire. Embers blowing out of it down into the barn. And I'm trying to stay calm, to keep him calm, and I'm trying my best because I know the owner's around somewhere. So I'm like, hey, heater's on fire. And they're like, oh, shoot. I'm like, go turn it off. Like, they didn't inspect. It was a bird's nest. There was a bird's nest in the heater. They didn't look at any of the units before turning them on, and the bird's nest caught on fire. I really hope there was no birds in there for the time of year. Possibly not, but also they've been like in the walls. So I hope none of the birds got hurt. And he was so upset. He really tried his best. Like, he didn't freak out. He didn't rear or buck or bolt. He was just very nervous, and he trusted me. I literally got him back to the new barn side, threw his blanket on, and put him back outside because I was like, there's no way we're coming back from this. Like, he tried his best to behave, and that should be rewarded. Live to fight another day and pick your battles. The thing that was the biggest safety concern for me was they decided to install the heating ducts that should have been installed in the first place while the horses were in the barn. They were people working off the books, off the record, cash pay, maybe, I don't know. But basically it was outside of their actual working hours for whoever they are contracted for. So I would come at night sometimes. It was like 6, 7, and they would be out there working. So the aisles were filled with duct and ventilation equipment, and Elliot had been spooked pretty badly when the first guy looking to see what needed to be done had gone up into the ceiling and was walking around. That scared Elliot pretty badly. He had a bad reaction to kids running around above him at an old barn of ours, and he panicked, and we were using it as like a positive reinforcement, like experience to expose him to things. And I didn't think much of it. Like, we got past it. And I found out that while I was at work, by the way, because that is important. I'm at work. I'm the only pharmacist, so I need to be on my A game. And I get a message that Elliot had broken through his Dutch door. So his stall had a Dutch door out to a pasture that was not his. And they would be open during, summer, spring, fall, whatever. I get a message about how upset she is that the door was open all night long because it was like negative 20 degrees outside. And I'm just baffled because I'm sitting there staring at my phone, high anxiety, ready to cry. I'm like, why would he run through a solid wood bolted Dutch door? And how? Like, he would have had to be booking to get through that. So I ask all the questions. I will put all of the text in here. You can pause and read all of them. I've redacted photos and names. And I really wanted to know what happened. There are stall cameras and there are cameras in the barn. So I asked, I don't have access to them, if she would look at them and share that footage with me, or at least tell me what happened. And she didn't answer me back. And she had blamed him that the indoor pipes had froze and the pipes for the waters inside and outside had froze. Has nothing to do with the fact that none of the piping was insulated and the barn was not heated and it was negative 20 degrees outside. Don't get me wrong. Open door with that kind of weather obviously isn't going to help the situation, but you can't tell me that that's the only reason that all of those things froze. She only cared about the door. She did not tell me how he was. She did not check him All she was concerned about was the broken door latch and everything being frozen. So she demanded that I come out and fill water buckets. I'm like, I'm at work. I can't. I ended up going straight out after work because I didn't want to upset anybody. And when I got there to look at the door and see the damage so that I could figure out how my husband and I could fix it, all of the waters had water in them. So I'm like, they're not frozen, they're whatever. She didn't specify at that time what was wrong with them. So I'm showing up to the barn, looking at the auto waters all through the barn. They're all unfrozen. So I'm not sure what she's meaning by that. So I go home, I text her a follow-up, and she's like, well, they won't refill. So they'll drink the water, but then everything behind it's froze, so they won't refill. I was like, okay, well, you didn't say that. And all she cared about was, are you going to come back out? I still was trying to get answers, right, as to why this happened. And all she cared about was, are you coming out to fill more buckets? I'm like, well, first of all, you don't have bucket hooks or bucket straps in any of the stalls, which is terrible management. Because what happens if in a situation like this where the pipes freeze, what's your backup plan? How are you hanging them? So then I got to the barn. I'm filling buckets. There's only, I think, 9 stalls on the new barn side that I have to get water for. And I'm filling these buckets. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get them to hang. Meanwhile, there's a young girl there. She's helping me. And she's like, oh, you're Elliot's owner. I was like, yep. She's like, yeah, he ran through the door and caused all this trouble. And I'm like, who have you been talking to, first of all? And then I found out she's the daughter of one of the construction team members who was working on the duct work for the heating. And because she was young, I didn't want to take advantage of her. I started prying a little bit. I was like, oh, so your dad's on the team? Yeah. And she starts telling me that not only did the team hear Elliot freaking out below them, they continued to work without checking. They heard him break through the door, and they left. They did not tell anybody that he had broke through the door. They did not even close the door because worst case scenario, he spent the night outside in a field that has water and a shelter, right? So worst case scenario, he goes without hay for a couple hours and the door gets shut, whatever. Nothing. So with her inability to respond to my messages and my questions as a concerned horse owner, I let her know that I found out exactly what happened. And all she cared about was that the door was broken. She labeled him as reactive, that he needed better training, and that no other horses had the issue. The team was there working till midnight in the ceiling with power tools, cutting metal with the horses in the barn. And she had the audacity to say that they're warm, safe, have food and water. I'm like, wrong. He should have never been in that stall. Not to mention, when they had done the initial evaluation, she was there and saw how freaked out Elliot was about people being in the ceiling. So that pissed me, obviously I'm angry. So that pissed me off severely. And she claimed that my horse was the only one that freaked out and she wouldn't show me any of the video footage. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here thinking that just because my horse is the only horse who broke through a door to escape that hellhole of torture doesn't mean the other horses were okay. They were probably running around their stalls and having high levels of stress. They just didn't break out like my horse did. And she refused to show me any evidence of the contrary. So that's the theory that I'm going with, because they're prey animals. They're not going to just be fine with power tools at midnight above them cutting metal. It just did not make sense to me. I really was upset that nobody told me how Elliot was. Nobody checked him for cuts or he ran what the physio thinks chest first through a solid wood door, and nobody told me how he was. And that was my biggest concern. And she accused him and I of putting the whole barn at risk. And it just felt like an attack. There was no notice of when construction was happening. And she had the audacity to say that any barn that's making improvements is doing construction around the clock. And that is absolutely false. I have never been to a barn where they A, did not communicate what construction was happening when, or B, worked until midnight with the horses in the building. Make it make sense. My 6th and final red flag, the final straw, was the aggressive texting. So I would receive constant messages while I was at work demanding responses or demanding action when I A, didn't have my phone, and B, could not leave work. I would get messages as late as midnight or 1 a.m. during the week, but I was expected to respect the fact that she worked weekends and needed her sleep. I would get left on red, or I would not have any of my questions answered, period. And she would just move on to something else. Like, you didn't answer the question that I asked you. The worst part was that she would be completely normal to my face as if nothing happened, and then would be a complete 180, Jekyll and Hyde via text message and messenger app. And it caused me severe anxiety and multiple panic attacks. Between that and the Dutch door incident, I was done.
Now we're going to start part 3. I know I rambled a bit, but we are going to do part 3, which is the soft landing and the saints of our current stable. So left rehab for new stable, left new stable for current stable, okay? So my friend, who I'm not going to name, has been very supportive, and I have been sending her all of the texts and messages that I've been getting and all the information about what's happening. And she's at a local barn and does training and stuff, lessons, and she agreed that this was a hellscape with a horrible person making a bad situation worse. So I had viewed my friend's place twice in the past, and I couldn't bring myself to move there because I have OCD, and the owners have small children, and some of the boarders have small children, and there's like toys everywhere, and like it's just disorganized, and it really like triggered my OCD. And then there's also a handful of people that smoke. They don't smoke in the barn, but it kind of follows them if they're smoking outside, and then they come into the barn, and it smells like cigarettes, and I get really, my throat gets irritated quite severely from cigarette smoke. So I wasn't sure about that. They also didn't have an indoor bathroom. They didn't have heated water. They didn't have a wash stall like inside. And they only had human door entries. Like, they didn't have big doors for like turn in and turn out, and that was like a safety concern of mine. And that's why I didn't go in the past. However, I was feeling hopeless and desperate, and I'm like, what of my creature comforts can I just get rid of for his safety and for his well-being? So she organized a meeting with me and the barn owner. The whole incident had happened on Saturday, and then Sunday morning, right away in the morning, I went out and met with this barn owner, and she encouraged me to, you know, let the owner know what's going on, what happened, why we're looking to move. They had 2 stalls available. One of them was a small stall that they weren't really advertising because it's pretty small for the average size horse. And then the other one was back in the self-care barn, even though if you didn't want to do self-care, they would just raise the cost of the board and you could still have the stall. But it was exposed to the elements because it's where it attached to where the outdoor boarded horses can come in for shelter. So it was very cold, and I didn't think he would do well there. So I opted for the small stall, and they gave me a $100 discount because of how small it was and that they weren't really advertising it, but they could see the desperation that I had. It's a fine stall for Elliot, right? Like, he's outside during the day. He only comes in at night or in severe weather, and he has a whole bunch of hay. So he just kind of goes in, turns around, tucks himself, you know, goes to the bathroom in the corners, and he's got his big hay bag and his supplements and feed and toys and all the things. And he doesn't really have to move around much. The only downside is when there's bad weather. But I ended up signing the paperwork by 11 a.m. on Sunday. I had my husband help me move all of my stuff from new stable to current stable. And by 1 p.m., I had sent text notice to the owner of new stable that I was leaving without notice. Current barn owner had truck and trailer ready to go, and we headed over there. Again, it's another day of being negative 20 degrees outside, but I felt like I had no choice. Also, although 24/7 hay was available at new stable, the fact that they were outside was insane because his pasture specifically did not have a shelter, and the wind across the flat land was enough to like freeze your skin. I mean, it was really, really bad. And the only two sides of protection they had from the building was not where the wind was coming from. So that kind of led into a later issue, but basically it was very cold. They showed up with a step-up trailer, which Elliot's only ever been on one once, and we had trouble getting him back on it to leave the horse show. He's mostly trailered with ramp trailers, and we don't own a trailer, so we don't get the opportunity to practice very often with loading. He's never been terrible to load because he was a racehorse, so he traveled a lot, but there's also some trauma there, and he was not having it. So we tried for 40 minutes to get him on. I ended up emergency calling a wonderful trainer that I know and paid her emergency weekend fee for her to come out, and she got him on in 10 minutes. It was amazing. So in the spring, I am gonna pay her to bring her trailer so we can practice loading and maybe even teach Elliot how to self-load. And there's a step up on the property and the trainer's is a ramp, so we can do both. If the boarder with the step up is cool with us using the trailer, which it seems she is. She doesn't use it very much. So once we got to, he traveled really well. Once we got to the stable, he walked out real nice and calm and walked right into the barn. He wasn't even whinnying or seeing the other horses. The other horses weren't even reacting to him really either. Got him in his stall and settled in with hay and a water bucket in addition to the automatic waterer. He just acted like he'd been there his whole life. It was unbelievable. And I cried so much that day. The biggest issue I had coming from new stable to current stable was he was outside in really freezing temperatures, and he had a clip. He had blankets, obviously, but he puffed up a lot being out in those conditions. So when he came back to being stalled in at night and during bad weather, his coat kind of settled. And I noticed he lost so much weight. You could see his ribs. And that killed me. So now he is in a MASH refeeding program of beet pulp and alfalfa pellets in addition to his ration balancer and supplements until he puts weight back on. And it's kind of communal, so it's nice. You just bring in a bag of each and they'll let you know when it's your next turn to go pick them up. So as of today, he has 24/7 access to hay inside and outside. He has 2 pasture mates, a younger, more playful kind of dominant Arabian mix, and then an older, quiet, off the track thoroughbred. So it's a very good balance. And he's also surrounded, they have pastures on both adjacent sides. One of them is a pasture of the most playful Mustangs you've ever seen in your life. And he will sometimes play with them over the fence line if the other horses in his pasture aren't interested in playing. So he's got a lot of socialization. The fencing is also 95% electrified, but the owner also doesn't fault him for cribbing. So the cribbing gel that I got from Rehab Stable sticks really well to wood. So in his stall, I was able to do all the edges. The only thing it's not effective on is the door because it's a wood door and it has a metal piece on the top. So it stops the wood from being destroyed, but it doesn't absorb the cribbing gel, so it's less effective. So he does crib on his stall door. But we've also found he doesn't crib out of stress. He cribs like someone smokes a cigarette after dinner. So it's all around food. When grain gets fed in the morning, when grain gets fed in the evening, though we did find if we put his mash and everything into his bucket before he comes in, it takes him so long to eat that by the time he's done, all the other horses are in and everybody's quiet. And there's no feed being done, there's no anything like that. So he'll just go straight to eat hay and he won't crib. Now, if I give him a banana or like a treat or a carrot ball or apple ball, he will crib after he eats that. And I will stand there and he will see me and I will go, no. And he'll tuck his head back and he'll like go grab a bite of hay to eat. And if I turn my back, then he goes back to trying to crib and he'll go there with his little lip and he'll like wiggle it on the top of the door and I'll say, no, Elliot. And he'll be like, okay. And then he'll go and he'll eat hay. Once I know he's done when he actually physically backs away from the door and is eating his hay. He still has his hay ball and plenty of things that he can put his mouth on that does not require cribbing. So I appreciate there is like one spot next to the hay feeder outside where he can crib on some wood, and he will occasionally throughout the day in little spurts. And the barn owner doesn't care because, as she said, her facility is built correctly to withstand damages from livestock. I think that was like a little hit at New Barn. But I absolutely love the people. Everybody is so nice. It's humble, don't get me wrong. It's a converted cow barn. It's been around for a very long time, but it's reflected in the pricing. So my base cost for my smaller stall is $350 a month. I bring his ration balancer, and I do pay extra for him to have a big hay bag filled, and then for his stall to get cleaned on Sunday. So it comes out to like $450, $475, something around there. And at Rehab Stable, we were paying $1,477 a month. And at New Stable, we were paying $950 a month for all the things I listed that I didn't get as far as amenities. So this is saving me some major money. It's making it a lot more affordable for me to get the consistent vet visits, physio, saddle fitting, all the things that Elliot needs. And he is so relaxed. It's unbelievable. I literally got on and rode him when he, in the middle of winter, had 3 weeks off of riding. And I was able to ride him walk, trot, canter with no bucking, no issues. He was so happy. The barn is also close to my home. It's actually just a little bit further north of the rehab barn. And I have a lot of independence. This is just a place where people who love horses are gathered. So I can jump. It has an indoor and outdoor, as well as fields for hacking. I was able in his stall to customize it. So I installed hooks. I brought hay bags, removed the corner feeder that he was cribbing on, and have a loose hanging bucket so that he can't crib on it. And I installed a loose mineral feeder. There's no set barn hours. I'm glad to be with my friend. Like, it's so nice to go out to the barn and like talk to people. And the boarder who let us borrow the trailer to pick up Elliot is actually the owner of one of Elliot's pasture mates. And she is so nice. I've enjoyed talking with her. I've enjoyed talking with the owner, seeing my friend again. The other boarders I've met so far are really friendly. And I had a reunion. If you've been with my channel for a long time, you may remember Miss Mia Maple, Mia Thermopolis, Princess of Genovia. And she's here. And when I went into her stall for the first time and she smelled me and I talked to her, she put her head into my chest and it was unbelievable. She hates Elliot, don't get me wrong. She's very mare, but it was just so crazy. And then I found out another boarder on my half of the barn is one from 3 barns ago when I very first got Elliot, and she had moved. And so I know her and I know her dad. And it's just crazy how small the horse world is. And that's why when I do videos like this and story times, I don't use names. I don't try to burn bridges, but I do want to share my experience. And the best thing about the barn is that it has cats and not dogs. Because the dogs at New Stable would constantly run under Elliot. I was afraid they were going to get kicked because Elliot is afraid of dogs, and especially when they like don't respect his space. And they were jumpy and yippy and like just running all over the place, would run in the arena, would jump out of places that didn't have doors, and like it was just bad. I'm not much of a dog person. I like dogs. I just wouldn't own a dog, mainly because of my job. But the cats, I love cats. I love how independent they are. And I'll put in some clips.
Say, my name is Tux. My name is Tux. Tux, Tux, Tux. Hi, Tux. Tux, Tux, Tux. You're too cute. Meow. Simon. Simon. Hi. Okay, let's go. Come on, Simon. Come on, Simon. Oh, you're so good.
There's Tux, who is a tuxedo cat. There is Simon, who's a Siamese cat, and he's got cross eyes. It's so cute. And then there are 3 new kittens right now, O'Malley, Toulouse, and Ginger. They're quarantined right now because they're going to get fixed this upcoming week. And then once we've got them more socialized and they're not so scared, we will let them in the barn with the other cats. Unfortunately, they run a really responsible barn cat program. So the cats are fixed, their ears clipped, and they're fed, watered, they have litter boxes. But the reality of barn cats is they wander off to other barns, they get hit by cars, they get eaten by coyotes or picked up by an owl. So they've gone through quite a few cats, but that's kind of the nature of the business, unfortunately. So we're hoping these ones stick around. We also have 2 more that a boarder picked up at a farm where she was picking up hay. They were really sick, but they were so friendly. So she brought them to a foster home so that they can get antibiotics, get fixed, and their ears clipped, and then they will come out to the barn as well. So we may potentially have 7 cats out at the barn, and I'm so excited because they're so cute. I just have no more anxiety or stress. We both feel safe. I can tell he's comfortable because he fell asleep for the last 2 farrier visits. We thought he was being uncooperative in the cross ties, but when I took the cross ties off and just held him via lead rope, he fell asleep. He wanted to put his head down so he could stretch and fall asleep. And his worried little eyebrows just relax. And I've never seen that with him. And it just goes to show, like, even with minimalism, you can still have a really happy horse. And a happy horse makes a happy owner. And that is what I am now. Do I miss having an indoor bathroom? Yes. Do I miss having an indoor wash stall? Yes, with hot water. But at the end of the day, I'm not afraid of what will happen to my horse if I don't go out. It's close enough to home that I can go out and just hang out, can clean his stall, give him treats, brush him. I don't have to work him. But also, he's so comfortable that I know I can just hop on whenever I want and ride around, walk, trot, canter, go over some small jumps, have fun again. And I am so grateful to the current barn owners, and they're so nice. They're a nice couple with some kids, and one of the older boys loves Elliot, and Elliot loves him. He even told the animal communicator that. And I just feel like we're where we need to be a partnership again, and to be carefree, and to just have fun. And I said, when I moved from a rehab barn, I was like, new barn, 2026 is gonna be our year. All good things are coming in 2026. Mercury's out of retrograde or whatever is the thing. And in a way, I was right. It just wasn't where I expected. And I think that is the beautiful thing about how the universe works. So now, hopefully, this year, we'll get lots of GoPro and vlogs, maybe even a few show vlogs. Come summer, maybe. And I'm excited to share the journey with you guys. So I will hopefully plan for a barn tour soon, and hope you guys enjoyed this story time, and I hope that it helps anybody who needs the encouragement to recognize the red flags and do better for yourself and for your horse. See you in the next one.